The alleyways behind the Kalighat district in Calcutta did not smell of incense or spiritual enlightenment. They smelled of open-air sewage, damp charcoal smoke, rotting tropical fruit, and the heavy, metallic tang of unmanaged human sickness. 3 modern, high-earning professionals stood outside the rusted iron gates of a historic hospice building, looking down at their dirt-streaked leather shoes. They had not come to India out of a desire for charity. They had been sent there by the global board of directors of a multi-billion-dollar international healthcare conglomerate based in Zurich. The corporate mandate was clinical, detached, and entirely metrics-driven. Conduct an on-site ethnographic evaluation of historical grassroots care models to optimize our corporate social responsibility reporting. They were expected to stay for 2 weeks, take photos with local children, fill out spreadsheets, and return to Europe with an optimized PR strategy.
Julian, 38, stood in his wrinkled light blue button-down shirt, his fingers thumbing his corporate smartphone out of sheer muscle memory. In Zurich, Julian was a senior operational auditor, a man whose entire personality was built around detecting systemic inefficiencies. He viewed human beings as data points to be organized into neat columns. Over the last decade, he had systematically managed budget cuts across dozens of community clinics, treating the resulting layoffs with a chilly, calculated professional detachment. He lived in a state of quiet, unceasing cynicism, believing that everyone was ultimately motivated by self-interest, and that compassion was simply a marketing term used to manipulate public perception. Next to him was Chiara, 26, wearing a simple charcoal gray t-shirt. Chiara was a brilliant, rising corporate communication strategist who lived her life entirely through screens. She suffered from severe chronic anxiety and a profound sense of isolation that she masked with hyper-curated social media profiles. She had turned her own personality into a glossy, optimized brand, but inside, she felt entirely hollow. She didn't know how to look a real person in the eye without calculating how the interaction would look as a caption or a slide deck. Finally, there was Dr. Lin, 50, an East Asian woman wearing a plain beige blouse behind her wire-rimmed glasses. Dr. Lin was an elite hospital administrator who had long since stopped practicing actual medicine. Years of navigating high-stakes corporate healthcare politics, budget deficits, and legal liabilities had calcified her heart. She no longer saw patients. She saw occupancy rates and risk management profiles. She was profoundly burned out, maintaining an emotional distance from human suffering that had slowly turned into total numbness.
A local sister of the mission met them at the gate. She didn't look at their expensive luggage or their corporate credentials. She simply handed each of them a thick canvas apron, plain white with a distinctive faded blue border. "Put these on," she said, her voice gentle but unyielding. "The floor is busy today. We do not need observers. We need hands."
Julian adjusted his collar, looking at the apron with open distaste. "Sister, we are here on a strategic consulting directive from the executive board. We have a set of core operational key performance indicators to audit." "The only metric here, brother," the sister interrupted smoothly, "is love. If you do not wish to give it, the gate is right behind you." For the first 36 hours, the 3 corporate travelers plunged into a world that completely shattered their legalistic defenses. This wasn't a sterilized hospital with automated triage systems. It was a place where human suffering was met bare-handed, stripped of all bureaucratic armor. Julian was assigned to the laundry and supply distribution area. He immediately tried to optimize the workflow. He created a mental model to accelerate the sorting of linen, but his calculations kept failing because the variables were unpredictable. A sudden influx of critical patients would completely disrupt his schedule. He found himself forced to manually scrub heavily soiled linens alongside local volunteers who sang softly while they worked. The sheer physical labor stripped him of his arrogance, leaving his muscles aching and his mind frantic from the lack of structure.
Chiara was assigned to the dining area, tasked with spoon-feeding elderly women who were too weak to hold their own bowls. On her first afternoon, she sat beside an elderly woman whose face was a beautiful, ancient map of deep wrinkles. Chiara's hands shook. She reached into her pocket for her phone, desperately wanting to capture the moment, to distance herself from it through a digital lens. "Put the machine away, child," a volunteer whispered beside her. "Look at her. She is not a photo. She is a mother." Kiera slowly dropped her hand. She looked into the old woman's eyes, clouded with cataracts, yet incredibly bright with a raw, desperate hunger for simple human recognition. For the first time in years, Kiera didn't think about her brand. She scooped a small portion of warm rice dal, held the spoon to the woman's lips, and watched her swallow. When a drop of broth spilled down the woman's chin, Kiera didn't reach for a sterile wipe out of clinical habit. She gently used the edge of her own white, blue-bordered apron to wipe it away, her heart giving a violent, unscripted thud of genuine empathy.
Meanwhile, Dr. Lin found herself in the intensive care ward, standing before an old man who was in the final, active stages of respiratory failure. The room was warm, filled with the soft, steady murmurs of prayers. Dr. Lin's clinical instincts instantly kicked in. "We need to intubate," Dr. Lin said automatically, her voice rising in administrative panic. "Where is the mechanical ventilator? What is his diagnostic chart? We need to establish an intravenous line for life support metrics immediately." An older sister placed a gentle hand over Dr. Lin's wrist. "Doctor, look at him. His body has finished its work. He does not need a machine to stretch his agony for 3 more days to satisfy a hospital ledger. He needs to know he is not an orphan. He needs to die with a name." Dr. Lin looked down at the dying man. He was holding on to a small piece of cloth, his breathing shallow and rattling. For decades, Dr. Lin had used medical bureaucracy to shield herself from the actual reality of death. But looking into this quiet room, she saw no machines, no lawyers, and no balance sheets. There was only a human spirit preparing to cross a threshold. Slowly, the calcified layers around Dr. Lin's heart began to fracture. She knelt down by the low cot. She didn't reach for a stethoscope or a syringe. Instead, she took the man's cold, rough hand in both of her own. She began to speak to him in a soft, soothing tone she hadn't used since her first year of residency 25 years ago. "I am here," Dr. Lin whispered, her eyes filling with hot, unbidden tears. "You are not alone. You are safe." The man's eyes fluttered open for a brief second. He didn't see an administrator. He saw a human being co-suffering with him. He let out a long, peaceful breath, his hand relaxing in hers as his spirit departed. Dr. Lin sat on the floor for a long time, weeping silently, feeling the profound, terrifying beauty of medicine stripped of its corporate industry.
That evening, the 3 travelers sat on the low concrete roof of the hospice building, looking out over the chaotic, colorful skyline of Kolkata as the twilight turned deep indigo. They wore their white aprons, now stained with soup, water, and sweat. Julian sat with his head in his hands, his phone completely forgotten inside his pocket. "I've spent the last 10 years cutting budgets for community clinics," he said, his voice breaking in the darkness. "I told myself I was making the system efficient. I told myself it was just logic. But I was just running away from the reality that every dollar I cut meant a real human being was left to suffer in an alleyway. I've been a coward, Kiara." Kiara reached across the space between their chairs, placing her hand on his shoulder. Her touch was grounded, simple, and entirely free of performance. "We've all been running, Julian. I've been hiding behind a digital identity because I was terrified that if I stood still, people would see how empty I am. But today, when that old woman smiled at me just for holding her hand, I realized that my online footprint is completely weightless. This apron has more weight than my entire digital life." Dr. Lin looked up at the stars piercing through the city smog. "Mother Teresa once said that we can do no great things on this earth, only small things with great love. I thought my job was to build great medical systems, but a great system can still leave a soul to die in absolute isolation. We don't need more optimization, Julian. We need more proximity.
The remaining week of their evaluation was no longer an audit. The spreadsheets remained blank. Instead, the three corporate professionals worked with a radical, uncalculated devotion. Julian used his logistical genius to rearrange the supply room not to save money, but to ensure the local sisters had easier access to bandages and clean linens for the poorest patients. Kiara spent her afternoons recording the oral histories of the dying residents, giving them a voice and a legacy that would outlive their physical bodies. Dr. Lin used her medical expertise to train local volunteers in basic palliative comfort care, her clinical numbness completely replaced by a fierce, protective compassion. When the 2 weeks ended, they did not return to Zurich with a polished corporate social responsibility slide deck.
Three months later, the executive board of the Zurich healthcare conglomerate assembled in the grand, glass-fronted boardroom overlooking the Swiss Alps. The CEO tapped his premium pen against his tablet. All right, let's look at the Kolkata ethnographic evaluation. What are the operational metrics we can integrate into our annual public relations report? Julian stood up at the end of the long mahogany table. He wasn't wearing his tailored corporate suit. He was dressed in a simple, unpretentious linen shirt. He pulled up a single image on the massive digital screen. Not a chart or a budget breakdown, but a photo of a plain white canvas apron with a faded blue border. "We are not presenting a PR strategy," Julian said, his voice calm, steady, and carrying a sudden immense authority that made the boardroom fall dead silent. "Because you cannot optimize the human soul. Our evaluation has concluded that our current corporate model is profoundly inefficient at its primary purpose, keeping people alive with dignity." The board members blinked in stunned silence. The CFO leaned forward. "Julian, what are you suggesting? Our quarterly margins—"
"Our margins are built on emotional distance," Dr. Lin cut in, stepping forward beside Julian, her eyes bright with a clear, unshakable purpose. "We are restructuring our entire community investment division. We are terminating our contracts with high-cost administrative consulting firms. Instead, we are diverting those funds to establish decentralized, bare-handed palliative care clinics in 3 major underfunded urban sectors. And we will not be managing them from this boardroom. We will be on the floor." Kiara stood up next, clicking to the next slide, which showed the faces and names of the local volunteers and patients from Kaligat. "We are changing our entire communication strategy. We are done marketing a polished corporate image. From now on, our reporting will focus entirely on radical transparency, human proximity, and the raw stories of the people we serve. We are going to stop trying to look important, and we are going to start doing small things with infinite weight." The CEO looked at the 3 transformed professionals. He didn't see the cynical auditor, the anxious strategist, or the burned-out administrator he had sent away 3 months ago. He saw 3 leaders whose hearts had been broken open and reassembled into something unshakable. The restructuring proposal was passed after a fierce 3-hour debate. It wasn't an easy transition, and the corporate system resisted the change at every turn. But Julian, Kiara, and Dr. Lin did not break. Every morning, before Julian sat down at his desk to manage the logistics of the new community clinics, he would reach into his bottom drawer, pull out a folded piece of white canvas with a faded blue border, and place it right next to his computer keyboard. It was his anchor.
It was his reminder that life is not a problem to be audited from a distance, but a reality to be met barehanded, one small, beautiful, compassionate act at a time.